there's somebody that's 10 times better than you on Twitter. And I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty good at the game, right? I can load up against the average person or even somebody that's an amateur that's trying to get in the league and win a game. My pros put 10-point spreads versus me, and they demolished me by 20 points. There's levels. There's levels. I go back to my neighborhood and don't lose a game.
He is the head coach and general manager of Raptors Uprising GC of the NBA 2K League. We welcome Nick Gartrelle onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me. It's an amazing opportunity to be up here.
Thanks for joining the show. Really appreciate it. We have a tradition, and especially for first-time guests, you can take the question anywhere you want it. What is your first or favorite basketball memory?
My first or favorite basketball memory. My first basketball memory, I guess like when I just spawned in on Earth is my dad was at the Basketball City in the bubble, New York City, and I have this memory of Mutombo putting me into the rim. Or even funnier is putting on Shaq's shoes. I have a picture of it at Basketball City. I've had a lot of moments at Basketball City, so those would be one of my first early memories of basketball.
Is Basketball City? Can you describe what that's like? I never heard of that before. What exactly?
Um, I was very young, but it's like it was a bunch of basketball camps during the summer that New York City kids used to go to. My dad was worked at those camps, and that's where I kind of would say that coaching. I started noticing coaching, but not really like fell in love into it until I was 14. But just definitely youth basketball camps. Now they have a different style now, and sometimes the MPBA works out of there. So
Oh, cool. So you mentioned you fell in love with coaching, and I think I might be making a generalization, but I think a lot of kids grow up to be players. But yet you had a passion for coaching. I would say at a young age compared to your peers. So why did you develop that passion, and what led you to transfer, this objective of being a coach into, entering the 2K league eventually?
it was really my dad and my late brother, Vaughn Gartrelle. I was around them growing up as an adult. I'm sorry, growing up as a teenager. So being able to watch them mold other players, and actually like have a direct impact on them was very important. Hearing the stories of what my dad did when he was going through the basketball system, coaching basketball because he's coached players like Joakim Noah, and he has a couple other players that play with college basketball, and how he talks about it. I always was very interested. I went to a lot of basketball camps as a kid, but I was always short, so I didn't want to play basketball. I wanted to play baseball. I felt my true sport and my true love is baseball. But when I got to see the X's and O's and see how my dad actually like would tell me like stories of him coaching, I fell in love with it at 16 years old. So I just started just running away with it.
So, what was it like when you told him that you're entering coaching, but it's in the esports space? How did that go? Was he receptive? Did he have any advice? What was kind of that conversation like?
Oh, my dad is my biggest supporter. I don't get to see him too much, but he's one of my biggest supporters. Like as soon as I got a coaching job, like a head coach, he called me Coach Gartrelle, which is like really cool because I've always watched other people call him Coach or Coach Gartrelle. So, and to me, he's always my dad. Like, I've played under him one time. I won't do it again, but like I called him coach as well. And so it was just like kind of like an honor. It was like kind of him like knighting me as like the next generation. So it was funny, like I go into virtual basketball, but he loves the fact that I'm in it. He tries to give me tips. He sometimes doesn't understand it. My dad is 66 years old, so sometimes like he'll tell me to sub out a player or make a player run. Um, those aren't the same things in 2K, but like a lot of the basketball concepts or basketball plays that I've learned or defensive schemes have been just like talking to my dad or speaking to the other coaches that I've had access to, the great coaches. So uh, he's definitely been like a huge impact on everything I've done.
Can you give a quick synopsis of how just the NBA 2K League works? Because I think for casual fans, I think they see the synergy, and I think I would guess a lot of just basketball fans they play 2K, but they
Mhm.
may not be familiar with the 2K League and how synergy works with just the different teams around the NBA. So can you kind of give a description of just how that works and how the synergy works for different teams?
So there are 25 teams, and each team has 5 players. Before in 2020, 2019, there were 6 players, but now we're down to 5 players. Each player is really good at one position. So there is, how there's a Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson. Each person is controlling a certain position, and each person is also controlling their own avatar. So you're not running around with Steph Curry, you're not running around with Klay Thompson. You're running around with your own avatar. Now your avatar, there's each position has 5 archetypes, and within those archetypes you can choose between, just to make it simple, being a Steph Curry, being a Kyrie Irving, being a Chris Paul, or like at center you can be a Shaq, or you can be more of a Jokic, or you can be more of a Karl Anthony Towns. So there's different archetypes, and each of those archetypes have pros and cons, and you kind of make the team work through synergy. So we this year we had a point guard who was an MVP level candidate. We had a shooting guard who we drafted for. We had 2 returning players, small forward and center, and then we traded for one on a different team. So each of them play a different position, and they're really good at it. Out of 100 and I want to say 25 times 5. I'm not going to get it right, but I would shoot somewhere around the 140s. These are the 140 best players in the world, and a lot of people try out. Um, but you have to make decisions, and it comes between talent, comes between synergy on the player side, and chemistry issues, and you just go through all that, just like an actual GM process of it.
So what is that like? Because is there a similarity when you, because I'm sure you've seen, your dad coach and there's tryouts and there's a bunch of players that they think they're awesome in the gym. And then when we get into a team setting, I mean, they just don't have the skills to actually be a professional. And I'm sure in the 2K league, you probably have, I mean, these people all the time, they say, I'm awesome at 2K, I'm the best at 2K, but can they really play in professionally against the elite talent? So what is the tryout process like? Is it a bunch of like people that they think that they can hang with this the elite and then they get a reality check once the tryouts begin?
Yeah, the trial process is a little bit different um, than like what people are used to. So you play, and it differs from year to year. But let's use last year. You play in these leagues like fan ran tournaments or people that run events, and you watch them play against the top talent in the world. And while that's going on, teams are running league tournaments, and whatever team wins, that 5 players make the draft pool, and then we can choose one extra player that played really well in the tournament, or somebody that you had your eye on. A lot of teams do that as well. Like somebody that didn't play well in the tournament, but I've had my eye on him on the whole entire time, and you throw him in the draft pool. So you could have a total of 6 players. If you run the tournament twice, you can have 12 players. And then the NBA 2K League runs a tournament in NBA 2K where the top 10 users make it in that wouldn't usually have a typical chance. And then same thing for 5v5, and they make the league as well. And then eventually they go through this whole background process through the NBA, because the NBA doesn't play about their background, and the pool is between, could be, I've seen it up to 300 players in there, or
Wow.
it could be 200 players, and you're searching through each player, but you also have certain positions that you're filling out. So if you need a shooting guard, I don't need a power forward, so all the power forwards are gone. So now I'm just going through a list of players that can play shooting guard or specialize as shooting guard. The draft process is definitely tedious because, unlike real basketball, um, the game changes every year. Obviously, in real life basketball, the game will, you might have to add a new move, or maybe I need to shoot a little bit deeper, or I need to shoot on the mid range. The game changes. Like mid ranges might not fall as much in the game, like 2K22, but in 2K23 it might. Corner threes might be a little bit tougher, so maybe I need more shooting. Or if it's easier, then I say I can take a better shooter. Sorry, a lesser shooter, but play a better defender. So you just have to look at the landscape of the game. You need to look at the landscape of the players, and then also look at the builds as well, because if they're running around with builds that are not going to be good in the league version, because the league build version is completely different than what you guys play in 2K.
Hmm.
It Yeah, it's definitely plays a huge part in it, that you got to look at the archetypes and say, hey, like this wouldn't he has so much going on in his character that he wouldn't be good in the league. So you look at every side of the draft process, and even then, if you don't even like the draft, you might have to trade for somebody.
A quick timeout from the interview to request a favor. If you love our interviews, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to hear more interviews from the world of basketball, featuring journalists from SB Nation, ESPN, CBS Sports, and The Athletic. Now, back to the interview. Do the developers work with you in the development of the game? Because this is your livelihood. I mean, there's a lot on the line with these leagues, and I think from a consumer standpoint, we're just buying the game for $60 and we're just hoping for a great experience playing casually. But this is a lot on the line in this league. So are they working together with you for feedback about the game? Like, how is that different than just a person is complaining, is playing on their couch, compared to this is a league that's super competitive, that's linked to the NBA. What is that process like in terms of, once a new version of the game comes out? Do they come to all the coaches and all the general managers to have a discussion about improvements and how to just improve the game for next year?
Uh, we have a chain of command. It goes for our league ops, and our league ops does a great job communicating with visual concepts, and then he will come down to us and say, "Hey, what builds do you want to see in the game?" From a GM standpoint or coach standpoint. For me, I'm doing both, and then he'll ask all the players. So all the players that are currently retained or still under contract will have an option to see the players, and then insert the archetypes that they want to add in, and then they will, just before the game drops for us, our version drops, they will send 10 players out to San Francisco to test the game, to make sure there's no bugs, to make sure there's no overpowered badges, or say, hey, this build is good, but it needs to be a little bit better if you want to see more variety between the archetypes and different play styles.
So I want to ask you about the training for your team.
Mhm.
Like, once you get prepared for the season to start, how does that work? You mentioned kind of the differences between real life basketball and then what happens in terms of the NBA 2K league. You kind of explained those differences in terms of coaching style, and then how just these players, especially if they're rookies, how's that, they're playing professional. I'm sure that's very different than what they did previously. This is the top tier competition. So, what is that transition process like in terms of your coaching style?
Excuse me. Excuse me, sorry. It's definitely different. Definitely different than traditional basketball, because in traditional basketball, especially with NPBA rules, you can only practice somebody for 2 hours, 3 hours, right? But for us, we can practice somebody pretty much all day. I In the beginning of training camp, we start practice at 12, or they get in the building at 12, and we start practicing from 12:30, and we've went to 8 before. We've went from 12:30 to 10. So the training camp is just going, because it's just a mental, it's more of a mental lock in than a physical game. For training camp, it's definitely different, but it also has the same thing as like basketball. Like, a lot of it crosses. Um, the 2K in 2K league and in the NBA, sorry, excuse me, we both use synergy to kind of create game plans, or look at some things that they didn't do well last year, and then just kind of utilize that during practice. But the only thing that's kind of different is they run against each other, because there's 10, 12, 15 players, or they might bring in practice players. For us, we're practicing against other teams that are already in the league. You don't get the option of practicing against somebody that's not in the league, unless um, a really good amateur player gets the league build from their friend. So then maybe we will play them. But outside that, you're usually typically playing teams in the other conferences, running plays against them. So you try to be very careful on it, because you don't want them to steal your plays. It's also from a pride factor from coaches, that you don't want them to run the play before you run the play, just because they're like, well, I drew the play up, and then now you get the credit. So there's always a running joke of who runs the play first. So there's a lot of that goes into it, but there's a lot of it that's just the same. We still watch film after we practice. We also get on each other immediately, just like how it is if you're not taking it serious or you need to go harder, because a lot of communication needs to go into in the 2K. And a lot of people just think you just sit at home and we're just sitting there pressing buttons. I'm not telling people to press buttons. They're already at the top of their game. It's just about more aligning everybody on the same goal.
So once you get into the first game of the season, how does that work? I think there was a video that went viral of trash talk. Like, is that very similar to real life basketball? Like, you can tell any stories of just how heated it got, just in terms of playing opponents. Is that very similar to what you see just playing at the park here, just in terms of how heated it can get, or is there kind of a different type of camaraderie in terms of the esports world?
There's definitely a they. they love each other. They speak in the chat all day to each other. They literally get on Twitter. There's 145 of them, and they're in Twitter talking to each other all day. They might not like each other as much as they might not like the next person, but their trash talk is just trash talk. It really just gets right there. I think one of our players is viral. I know there's the Worthen Colt one where he and the Celtics jersey where he's just yelling "A" the whole entire time. That we call him Colton Clark around here. Um, but the trash talk, it's just trash talk. You just leave it right there. Even I've been involved as being a young coach, so I'm around a lot of the players' age, considered considerably like the other coaches around 30 years old or 40 years old. That they've really typically, but I grew up with them because I played video games with them, and I took a different path, unlike them. So a lot of them will talk to me, and they will talk to our players, and they'll go real hard. Like they make a joke, during one of the clips that went viral, they were calling me Darvin Ham. So they kept saying the salute sign to me. And, it didn't end well for them because my team just started yelling salute at them. So it was a very funny moment. But the trash talk is very big in our league. It makes our league very popular. And the in-person play is what changes it. That's what makes people fall in love with our product.
So, can you talk about just the esports scene overall? Because I think, for myself, I'm a video game player, but I think esports is fascinating, and I'm very interested to see how a lot of esports leagues they've tried to get on linear television like ESPN or other networks, but yet I think the platform that has the most fan response and viewership is on Twitch or YouTube or other viewing avenues.
Mhm.
Where do you kind of see in terms of getting the most exposure for the NBA 2K League specifically? Is it kind of garnering more casual fans that might not be familiar with esports, or is it kind of leaning into just your current fan base now and just continuing to cultivate fans of this video games overall?
I think it's going into your grassroots. I think that's huge. As I got understanding the esport industry a little bit more and starting to see, I went to CDL this year and I just watched a little bit of Evo
Yeah.
that just passed by, and just realizing that a lot of these companies build into their grassroots because the people that watch the game are your viewers, and then they start telling their friends. And for us, like my friends and family who genuinely do not watch or don't play 2K will come and start watching the games based on the fact of me, and then they will say, hey, this is actually really interesting, and then they start asking questions. And now I have friends that just watch it on one-offs and start asking me questions about 2K League and say, hey, like, why do they run this or why do they do that, just because they just started watching it in their own form. But for us, I think, and especially to grow esports, you need to tap into your grassroots, because those are the people that 100% understand the product, 100% understand the game, and those are the people that boost up your pros even further. I had my first chance of actually understanding how different it is, like, because I play in the US and we're obviously in the top league, but we all know each other. I coached in eFIBA, which was one of the most amazing things I ever did. And I got to go to Brazil and I was a rock star. And then when we went to Sweden, I felt like a star, like a superstar. Like I walked up to people and it was my first time seeing them, but I've like maybe known them on Twitter here and there. So I introduced myself to Team France, and they tell me they already know who I am and they want to take a picture. I walk over to Philippines and I introduce myself as myself, and they tell me I don't need to introduce myself. And you start realizing that it's bigger international too as well, and they're all grassroots. They all want to be in the league and they all watch it. So I think just pushing into that will grow esports as a whole. ESPN, it was important, and I think it's still important, especially for a sports news cycle. Um, and we were on ESPN during 2020 COVID year, but I definitely think our fan base is 100% on Twitch and through our grassroots on Twitter or wherever your fan base relies on social media platforms.
So, how do you see that maturing in terms of just overall, like the future of esports and all these games? Because there's so many games out there, and all of them are so different. And then that this, I feel like, kind of your mainstream. public, they're probably not aware of Twitch, but yet Twitch has millions and billions of viewers. Like, how is that? It's a very different way of, consuming media, because, when I was, younger in the 90s, everybody consumed media mostly the same way. And now you have the split of, two, different distinct audience consuming media in so many different ways. Specifically, it's sports, and esports is such a huge field. So I just find that fascinating in terms of, you have just a new audience that's really into all these competitive esports, and they're not even watching like what's traditional sports anymore. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, as and I've seen it firsthand as the league grows and the years continue going on. The the NBA players get younger, right? And now I'm officially older than some NBA players, which is astonishing to me, because I just never thought I'd get here in reality. But those players play 2K, they play video games, and as these younger kids from 10 to 14, 15, 16, they start going through life, they're also watching Twitch growing up. Like, I mean, I'm not into Twitch. Like, I don't watch it going home. I'll maybe watch a Twitch player here or a Twitch like person that entertains me, but they all have their person that they all want to watch, and that's like their way, and it's also their best way to communicate with them, because their your favorite Twitch person will communicate back with you. When you're watching Sports Center, he's not going to communicate back to you.
Yeah.
So like, you got Scotty Barnes and Manuel Quickly always posting that, like, need somebody for 2K runs, or they're always playing 2K, and that's just our younger generation players. What about those players that's in college? Same thing for NCAA, and same thing for Madden. So, like, as the esport will grow, because the NBA players are starting to notice it.
So, what feedback have you had from just NBA players? Is there a lot of synergy between them and the 2K league? Like, how does that work specifically in terms? You mentioned Scotty Barnes. Are they attending just different competitions? Are you getting regular feedback from them? What is that like?
Not me. I'm not. He's came to the practice facility and he's done stuff with us. Uh, I'm not very much cool with him. I'm more cool with some W players here and there. I mean, it just all depends on who you're cool with and who you play with. Because if you're the best in the world, the NBA players will definitely go communicate with you and just ask you to play 2K with them, and then you make natural connections by just being part of the org. So I've been part of 3 orgs: the Nets, uh, Timberwolves, and Raptors. And the Nets at the time didn't have the Liberty, but the Timberwolves at the time have the Lynx. So I got cool with the WNBA players, and I speak to Kayla McBride, who's I'm very close with. I've had Nina come in and watch an in-person game, and all they say is it's amazing. They just wish they knew about it a little bit earlier, or they never had any, like, they never were able to see it for real. So when they actually got to see the actual gameplay, or actually got to see the passion put into it, they actually cared about it. Because now, if I send a game to Kayla, she'll go watch a game. She watched me last year during the playoffs. I get a lot of people that saw me on 2K TV, or they saw me on some news channel just for 2K League, and they'll just say, like, this looks cool, and then they actually start watching it, and it grows. So just like those natural interactions, it can't be forced. I don't think anything forced in growing any sport or growing any program, it doesn't help. But if it's natural, it will come off natural, because people love that. That's like the best thing that people reside with.
So, how do you feel about esports in colleges? I live in Denver. There's University of Colorado Boulder. They have a facility that's equipped by Alienware, sponsored by Alienware, to sponsor their esports teams. And I think that's becoming a trend in terms of actual colleges kind of getting into the esports. Where do you think is that like the right decision compared to internationally how esports is playing out in terms of this? I guess esports going more of a traditional sports route in terms of funneling talent in high school, college, and then turning them professional. Is that the right way for esports, or should they, go a different way in terms of, a untraditional route, so to speak?
I think it's the right way. Same thing as like a traditional player, that maybe a 3-star recruit who gets a scholarship to play football, and then he has the aspiration to make the NFL, but he can't make the NFL, but he gets to leave with the education. So I think it's just an easier way to help kids get a college education. And if they can't make it into the league, or can't make it as pro into their respective esport, or they can't get into as a coach, social media, and they at least leave with an education. And I think that's very important. I wish I had something like that growing up as well. Esports, I was starting to get popular when I was growing up. I'm only 25. I turn 26 next week. Um, you know, I've been approached by schools to do stuff with their college esports program. For me, I'm trying to see if I can turn into a college education. Like, I'll help you guys if I can get an education. But I also have some other things that I want to get into as well. So just trying to make the decision. But I definitely think it's very important to continue having that, because it's also boosting up programs. I know a lot of people now, college students play video games a lot. So it's also a nice thing to keep people out of trouble and just keep them focused in on the game, and, less things outside, less problems.
Last question for you. What
Mhm.
advice would you give to anyone wanting to enter playing in the NBA 2K League, or just, wanting to take their passion for whatever video game that they're playing and
Mhm.
turn professional? Like, what is the path? Because I'm always fascinated because, my brother, he's really into the Smash Brothers scene. So he played a lot of local tournaments. And then there's a path there in terms of how to, play more tougher competitions and move up the ranks. But I know every video game is different, so kind of what is your best advice, just depending in terms in regards to just the NBA 2K League, of wanting to take that passion and turning it into a possible career?
Get on Twitter, connect with the community, because sometimes it's who you know, not what you know. I've seen some players get in the league over some players that are better than them, just based on who they know. So sometimes it's about getting in the community and starting to play with them and starting to join these tournaments, and then start connecting with people, and, playing with the top talent in the world. Um, it will always help you, because the top talent in the world is always going to play, is going to be in the league. So at that point, it's when it comes down to you between somebody else, it always comes down, who am I more comfortable with, especially like at certain positions like shooting guard or power forward. So just knowing who you're going for, knowing what you want to go for, and know what position you want to lock in on, because if you think you're the best in your local neighborhood, there's somebody that's 10 times better than you on Twitter. And I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty good at the game, right? I can load up against the average person, or even somebody that's an amateur that's trying to get in the league, and win a game. My pros put 10-point spreads versus me, and they demolish me by 20 points. There's levels. There's levels. I go back to my neighborhood and don't lose a game. I go to local tournaments in New York. In New York, I might lose one game. But on Twitter, there's somebody that's always there. So just continue learning, trying to get better at your craft. And the game changes every day. So you need to always stay ready and one step ahead of everybody else.
Nick, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you
Mhm.
very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Can you let our fans know where they can find you all over social media, and then anything else you want to plug as well?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, nyck.g. It's Nick, but it's just for the Y's for New York City, because I always rep for where I'm from. N Gartrelle on Twitter, but if you want to follow anything, please follow Raptors Uprising on Twitter, Instagram, on all socials. It's very important for our brand, and just pushing to Toronto esports as well, because we don't just host 2K things. Sometimes we host events that you guys can come to, especially if you're in the Canada area, Toronto area. And then also, if we have online tournaments, you could also join that as well. They also do have a MLS, Major League Soccer team as well. So you could also watch that as well. So we do multiple things over here, but obviously I'm predicated towards Uprising GC. So just always pushing them as well.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.